Let's talk about John Sayles' new movie. It's called Honeydripper. Fantastic title, John. Just give us the background to this. 1950, are we 1951?
Yeah, Honeydripper takes place in a little cotton-picking crossroads town of Harmony, Alabama in 1950. Danny Glover plays the proprietor of the Honeydripper Lounge, who's a boogie-woogie piano player, and he's about to lose his club unless he has one big Saturday night, and he starts building houses of cards. And it's kind of about the roots of rock and roll and what it was like to live in the Deep South in 1950.
And recreating the Deep South of 1950, how did you set about that?
You look for places that all the new stuff is built about 2 blocks away from the old stuff. So we actually shot in Greenville and Georgiana, Alabama. Georgiana's the town that Hank Williams grew up in, and the main street hasn't actually changed that much since then. It's still got major railroad tracks going through it instead of much of a road, and most of the new stuff is about 2 blocks away. So very often you just change some awnings and some signs, and you're back in the South of 1950.
You mentioned right at the beginning talk about the cotton picking South, which for a lot of people in this country just is like a phrase. You know, it's
Dash Nugget.
Exactly, that's what it is. But here, this is real. Presumably, you needed to find somewhere where the cotton was indeed high.
Yeah, actually, it's not high
was
anymore.
Was that CGI?
I wish it had been. We tried to raise money for the movie for a full year with Danny Glover attached, and couldn't. And then the cotton was all picked, and so we had to wait a whole nother year to make the movie once we got the money. CGI can do a lot of things, but it can't put all those little cotton balls on the plants. No, we actually went to an area where they still grow cotton. It's not the king of the economy the way it used to be. And since about the early 60s, it's been harvested by machine. So we were in the rare situation of having to have a seminar on cotton picking in Alabama for our younger extras.
That's great. How do most people, at the time where your movie opens, how do most people hear music?
Well, if they're poor, they go to the one sharecropper shack in the area that gets electricity because rural electrification had just really hit rural Alabama, and they listen to the radio and they hear some. Most people, however, if they're poor, they either make it themselves. The movie opens with a kid playing a diddly bow, which is a wire taken off a broom, stretched really tight, and you bottleneck on that. Or they go to the revival tent and hear gospel music, mostly without instruments, mostly just the human voice, or they go to a roadhouse. And if that roadhouse pays their power bill, they have a jukebox, and if it doesn't, like the Honeydripper Lounge, they have live music.
And explain the Honeydripper Lounge, giving your movie the
Honeydripper, if you listen to blues songs and you hear Jelly Roll a lot, Honeydripper is the male equivalent of a Jelly Roll. And so, it's actually a fairly common name for juke joints in the South. We passed one every day on the way to work when we were shooting a movie in northern Florida, and it just seemed like a great name for a movie.
So you mentioned Danny Glover. Explain Gary Clark Jr.'s character and the impact that he has, and then we'll talk to bring Mark in.
Yeah, Gary Clark Jr. plays a young guy named Sonny Blake who wanders into town with a guitar case in hand, and it's 1950, and he's looking for work, and Danny's playing a guy who's never allowed a guitar player under his roof, doesn't like them on principle, had
good principle.
And murdered one in a stupid fight when he was a young man, and so he's kind of haunted by this instrument. And he hires this kid to pretend to be another player. But then when he opens the guitar case, there's no hole in the guitar, and it has wires sticking out of it, and he thinks this kid is a nutcase, and we're in big trouble now. So he's basically he's kind of the Johnny Appleseed of the electric guitar. He's wandering around, hopping on boxcars and just kind of spreading this new gospel of a new kind of music that nobody calls rock and roll.
When we were talking about the U2 3D movie in our middle hour, Mark said that he believes that the peak of music's achievement was skiffle.
Well, you have to contextualize this because the American, skiffle actually comes from America and house parties, and then skiffle is a very specifically British term that was brought back here by Ken Collier after going and playing with jug bands and then coming back and calling it. But it's essentially what you're talking about with the diddly bow, and it's with T-chest bass and jug band music.
Yeah, we call it jug band or hokum music.
And I think that's absolutely right.
And so, as someone who believes this to be the highest form of music attainable, what do you make of Honeydripper?
Well, I think it's playing so much into all the areas that I love. I mean, obviously, I'm a big fan of John Sayles. We have met before in Cannes, so there's absolutely no reason that you would remember that. Because I've been a film critic for 20 years, and there are some people whose work, every time it comes up, you think, I know I'm going to get. We talked a little bit about Brian Cox being a presence. Whenever Brian Cox is in something, you know it. What you're going to get with John Sayles' movie. Firstly, you're going to get not single character dramas, but dramas in which people interconnect. Which they're about the connections between people and about the connections between, in this case, between politics and religion and civil rights and all that stuff. I mean, it nods towards Robert Johnson. It nods towards all those things that I find interesting. But it does it in a way that never feels like you're being hectored or lectured. I mean, obviously, again, I think one of the things that people who know your work don't sometimes remember is that you come from writing exploitation scripts as well. You've written your fair share of really good schlockers.
Piranha, Alligator, giant cockroach movies.
When I first started working at Time Out, I bought as a present for the editor who had given me the job a copy of the novelisation of Piranha.
Yes, which had my name on it.
It did, yeah, and that's why I bought it.
I sued them for that.
Oh no!
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought it because he's a huge John Sayles.
Well, because I didn't write the novelisation of it, but it put my name on the cover.
I know.
You just put your foot in it there, Mark.
Yeah.
Well, I'm terribly sorry. Well, Jeff gave me the job anyway, so that was great. So that's what you get. What you get is you get fully rounded characters. You get interaction between the characters in which what you see is a story playing out with all those people. You get the connection between the civil movement and the musical movement, and I think the other thing, and I think you would agree with this, that runs through all of your films is that you feel a genuine affection for those characters. And what happens more and more in modern cinema is that it's about people that it's not only that the audience don't care about, you don't think the filmmaker cares about them either.
John?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I started as an actor, and one of the things that an actor always has to do is say, who can I be? Most people who are bad guys, who do bad things, don't think of themselves as that. They don't go home and say, oh, I'm a really awful person. What will I do that's awful tomorrow? They have their reasons for doing things. They justify what they're doing. And so as I write these characters, I try to see where they're coming from. And so that actor who comes to play that part has a little something to bake it, even if they do things that you don't admire. Danny Glover in Honeydripper plays a guy who lies, cheats, and steals from his stepdaughter who has a heart condition, and you still like him and you're rooting for him at the end of the movie, and because you understand where he's coming from.
Do you think that there was a definable moment when all these different musical strands came together, whether it be R&B or whether it be jazz and country and blues, or is it the suggestion of the film that actually it's the creation of the electric guitar which made all this possible?
I think the electric guitar was just a catalyst for there was this little battle between the guitar and the piano that lasted 5 or 6 years, and at the end of it the guitar was up there on the stage.
Has
and
a few advantages, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's cheaper, it's more portable, and once you could plug it into the wall, it's louder than the piano. And then, people like Ike Turner and Chuck Berry started playing the piano line and the honking saxophone line on that guitar. So I don't think it was one moment. I think there's stuff that was recorded in 1943 that you would have to call rock and roll. But I do think that there was a sea change, and that the musicians knew the way they know before the audience does, everything's going to change, and if I don't jump aboard this new thing, I'm going to be left behind. And that's pretty much what happened to the people in that rhythm and blues era. They were like the people in Woody Allen's radio days, really famous for about 5 years, and then not less famous, but pretty much unknown once rock and roll came in.